On the outside, Terror At Oakheart looks like a pretty promising horror game. The pixel art is horrifyingly made, the story has an interesting plot, the combat is fun and engaging, the music is top-notch, and the gore is to die for. Okay, maybe wrong choice of words, but what I'm trying to say is, all of it is ruined because of one huge flaw. The game holds your hand way too much. It feels like you're watching a movie at times because the story is always on track, going in one direction the whole time. But why? Why does this game fail to give the player a sense of exploration? For a game that takes you to so many different locations, you think it would feel the opposite, right? So what's really the problem here? Well, that's why we're going to go through the story and look at what this game excels at and what it lacks in, to find out why this game feels so linear and how it could be fixed. With that said, stab the bell icon and keep a lookout for 3 shadows. All that said, let's get right into the town of Oakheart. So, the story starts off with a strange monster calling for Teddy, saying the mask is waiting for him. This is when the game tells you to make your way to the basement, but you quickly get interrupted by a strange flashback. Teddy was dressing up as a clown in hopes of selling more ice cream, but he heard a loud crash from outside his room. Checking it out, he finds a creepy monster has seemingly came from the sky and crashed right outside his building. But before Teddy could do anything, the monster puts his slimy mask over him, putting Teddy under control of this hideous monster. You know, now that I think of it, this sounds kind of familiar, but maybe I'm just thinking of something else. After this flashback, you see Teddy trying to break free from his control, but to no avail. The monster then tells him to grab a saw to cut down the planks. This forces you to solve a puzzle. Well, I mean, calling it a puzzle is kind of a stretch. It's more so gather the items and put them in their place. It's very easy. But after unlocking the door, you'll find the saw and break the planks. And when entering the basement, you'll find the monster has a high body count. Okay, maybe I worded that wrong, but you know what I'm trying to say. There's a lot of dead bodies. This is when Teddy puts the mask on and meets with this thing. The monster tells Teddy to go out and get more fresh meat. And this is when the prologue ends and chapter 1 begins. Now, as you can tell already, the player is on a very set path, and not much is given to the player to explore or strategize. But we'll give this a freebie since it's the prologue. Its main focus is setting up the story, and I think it does a great job at that. You instantly get the feeling for what this game is about and where it's gonna go. With that said, chapter 1 has you set in the house with Ashley and Tyler at night watching TV. The news talks about Teddy and how there is a new set curfew for the town. That's right, Teddy killed so many that he literally caused the town of Oakheart to have a whole curfew. Not saying I like the guy, but impressive. Anyhow, you start out with Ashley going up and taking a shower, but the POV quickly changes to Tyler, with him going to the bedroom to check on the gun case. And get this, he takes the key and leaves the gun in the case. Now, this can be excused, but it gets worse. When Tyler goes back down to wash the dishes, he finds the window is open and says, "That's strange, I could have sworn the window was closed." Like, Tyler, you just saw news of how bad Teddy is, and how there is literally a goddamn curfew. And you don't think to, I don't know, check to make sure no one got into the house? Like, there's a goddamn killer on the loose and all you have to say is, "That's strange, I could have sworn the window was closed." Like, come on, how stupid can you be? Anyways, after Tyler finishes the dishes, he goes to the basement to get trash. But uh-oh, surprise surprise, Teddy is in the basement and he brutally gets killed. After this, the POV switches back to Ashley getting out of the shower because the power went out. You go back downstairs and grab a flashlight and go and check on Tyler. But as she makes her way, Tyler's head gets thrown through the window, scaring Ashley upstairs to call 911. After being on the phone, Teddy then chases Ashley and you quickly hide in the basement closet. And somehow, miraculously, it actually works. Once Teddy left the room, you go to Tyler's dead body and grab the key to open the gun case. You then go back upstairs and get out the gun. And as Teddy charges at you, Ashley fires multiple times, putting Teddy out of his misery, causing this chapter to end. Now, this chapter was alright. I thought I'd be playing the role of the serial killer based on how the prologue was set up. So I was a little disappointed to say the least when I found out that wasn't the case. I do, however, like the shifts in perspective. It keeps the story moving smoothly. But gameplay-wise, honestly, it may as well just be a cutscene. All you do in this chapter is go from point A to point B and occasionally grab an item. But other than that, you don't have much freedom to do anything. This is where problems really start to begin, and it doesn't get much better in chapter 2. In this chapter, you fast forward a year and you see Ted Stone get struck by lightning, bringing him back to life. We are then taken to Oakheart's police department a few hours after Teddy's resurrection. The Scoutmaster Beaver walks in and tells Sarah a huge tree had blocked off the bridge to Camp Oakheart. He continues saying he needs to talk to the camp counselors and needs Hadley to help get rid of the fallen tree. Also, after watching the news, he talks about how he thinks it's good that Ashley is working as a counselor at the camp. After this, the Scoutmaster leaves and Sarah heads to the cell to tell Hadley. And I'm just going to cut it short here since there is a lot of game padding in this chapter. Basically, you get to play as Sarah, Hadley, Eric, and Ace, each doing their own tasks. And one by one, each of them get killed in quite horrible ways, I might add. Teddy catches Sarah off guard and pulls a Mortal Kombat fatality on her, ripping her heart out and eating it. Teddy comes up behind Hadley and crushes his head like a goddamn watermelon. Teddy drops the card onto Eric, crushing every bone in his body. But Ace puts off a little fight and manages to get the dispatch and radio Russell, the sheriff, about Teddy's reappearance before getting killed. The POV then changes for the last time to Teddy, with the monster telling him the mask calls for Ashley to be the next servant, and to use the monster's children to infect the dead bodies.
What? What the fuck?
Not gonna lie, that sounds really weird and I couldn't find any better way to put that, but we're gonna move on. After this, Teddy throws these gray slug-like monsters to infect the bodies, and that is when the chapter ends. Overall, this chapter felt like it went on way too long, and you really didn't do much. Again, it feels like I'm just going from point A to point B, getting items to unlock certain doors or objectives. I think what should have happened is have each character do their own thing without it being overly complicated to pad on game time. And when Teddy appears, have the player try to fight off the monster with each character, to emphasize how strong and scary Teddy actually is. In each death scene, none of the characters really got to do that besides Ace. It makes it really hard to take Teddy seriously because of this. I will say the death scenes are just beautiful. Nothing wrong there, they are just chef's kiss. Now, moving on to chapter 3, we are placed outside the ranger station playing as the Scoutmaster. Beaver starts up the generator and goes inside to radio the camp about the blocked bridge. After, he goes outside to check on his dog Max and feeds him. He then gets firewood for the fireplace, but after this, the POV changes to Teddy outside near the dog Max. And for all you dog lovers, I'm sorry to say, but Teddy kills the dog in cold blood. This for me is when Teddy has just gone too far. Sure, killing hundreds and hundreds of people is pretty bad, it's pretty bad. But a dog? No, that's where you cross the line. Max did nothing wrong, he deserved better. And if you're still watching this video, type Max in the comments to show respect. Definitely not to boost this video. Anyways, after the Scoutmaster hears his dog yelp, he goes to check out what's going on, and when he gets close to Max, the now infected dog lunges at him and bites the Scoutmaster's arm right off. This has Beaver running in a panic to radio the PD, and I just gotta say, as serious as the scene is, I cannot get over the stupid look the Scoutmaster has while he's running with his arm cut off. It's just hysterical. I mean, just look at him. After this, the POV changes one last time to Teddy, where you're in control and you pick up the huge meat cleaver from the statue outside and head into where the Scoutmaster is. And this is when the chapter ends. As you can tell, chapter 3 is shorter and a little faster in pace. It felt pretty good, but again, you don't really have any choices or decisions to make. It's all very linear, and you're told what to do the whole way through. It feels a lot like the first chapter, to be honest. The fourth chapter, however, is a lot better, and is when the game, believe it or not, gives you a little more to do than walking around to objectives. In this chapter, you play as Russell the sheriff, entering the police station. Your main goal is to get to the dispatch room and check on your coworkers. As you explore this area, you'll notice it's been infected with this gray sludge, and now there's actual combat. Russell has a revolver that has about 5 to 6 rounds before having to reload, and now you can dodge. As you explore, you have to dodge and kill these gray slugs and infected bodies. You'll find Sarah, Hadley, Eric, and Ace all infected and having these strange tentacles sticking out of them. You'll also find items around the building to make a bomb to progress forward, which was nice instead of being told where to go. Once you make it to the dispatch room, you hear Scoutmaster on the radio, and both Sheriff and Scoutmaster explain what they've experienced so far. Russell decides to get rid of this great evil in Oakheart once and for all like a badass, but while on the radio, the Scoutmaster gets sliced in half by Teddy, and that's the end of the chapter. Overall, huge improvement from other chapters. You had fun and engaging combat with tough enemies. It was cool seeing how distorted Sarah, Eric, Hadley, and Ace were. I also like that I actually had to think on my own. I wasn't told what to do for every single step of the way, and that felt like a breath of fresh air. But unfortunately, I think this is the only time where the game felt like this. Going into Chapter 5 was really disappointing. You start outside the ranger station playing as the sheriff. When going inside, Russell puts together that Teddy is after Ashley. But before he could leave, he falls into the floor into some cellar-like area. You then have to kill the Scoutmaster in order to continue. But after you take him down, you exit the building, and that's literally it for Chapter 5. It was super short, and I was super confused because this really should have been part of Chapter 4. But I guess the developers wanted to make it seem like there was more levels or something. Thankfully, Chapter 6 was a little better. Basically, Lily tells the group of counselors that the bridge has been blocked and that they should all check the cabins to make sure there isn't any damage. Also, side note, I don't know if it's just me, but when going outside to the balcony of the main building, it looks very familiar to the one in Lakeview Cabin. But maybe I'm just looking too much into it. Anyhow, back to the game, this causes all of them to split up, which in every horror movie, it always goes so well and nothing bad happens. I think what I love the most is the very obvious overplayed stereotypes with the group. You have Lily, the nerdy girl, Rose, the blonde girl, Noah, the cocky guy that's dating the blonde girl, Ashley, the nice girl that has common sense, Jack, the average guy, honestly not sure how to categorize him, and lastly you have Ethan, the karate guy. Literally, his personality is karate. I wish I was joking. Anyhow, you play as all these characters going to different cabins and checking for damage, and they all end up doing some activity after they're done. But surprise, surprise, Teddy comes to the camp, and the best part is when you get to brutally kill each counselor one by one. Well, besides Ashley. Rose gets slammed into a tree, turning her into a strawberry-flavored gusher. Noah gets that weed whacker fade. Jack gets impaled and slammed into the ground. Honestly, that slam felt kinda personal. Ethan tries to put up a fight to defend himself using his truly impeccable karate skills, but gets thrown into a wood chipper. And Lily gets her face slammed into the canvas. You know, that's honestly pretty tame considering everything. But after this, your POV changes back to Ashley. She decides to check on the others and see how they're doing. And let's just say she found them hanging around. Okay, bad joke, I know. After this, she goes to get a weapon from one of the cabins and goes back to the counselor building. And okay, I stand corrected, Lily had it the worst, goddamn. After witnessing Lily get literally peeled like a banana, Ashley gets a tracker to hopefully make it so whoever finds her note will be able to track where Teddy would be taking her. Long story short, Ashley shoots at Teddy and Teddy knocks her out and takes her. And that's the end of Chapter 6. Overall, I like this chapter for its immense amount of gore, although it was really linear and story-driven, not much gameplay, but it was definitely fun watching the kills. But at least Chapter 7 has a little more gameplay, with the sheriff now at the camp and has a shotgun and revolver. Quickly you realize you need to make a flamethrower to continue forward to take down the monster in your way. This forces you to go to each cabin and kill the infected counselors. The combat was fun, but it got a little stale since they all have about the same attacks. Like, give me some projectiles I have to dodge or something. Just something new to keep the gameplay fresh and interesting. Also, you have to kill the infected dog Max, and that one, not gonna lie, that hurt the soul. But after this, you put together a flamethrower and continue forward. And this is when you find the note left by Ashley, and the sheriff uses the tracker to locate both Ashley and Teddy. And that's all for Chapter 7. Overall, a fun and somewhat challenging chapter, but definitely felt prolonged a bit. And again, you don't really have a choice on what you're doing and how to do the objectives. The final chapter feels the same way, but the combat gets really good here. It starts with the sheriff finding an abandoned house and gas station, seemingly owned by Teddy. You also find his old ice cream truck left abandoned at the gas station. When going in, you find a ladder which you end up using to get into the abandoned house. And going into this house, you find it covered in monsters and traps, and a simple ladder puzzle too. After this, you enter a room with a bunch of these tall gray monsters without arms. And this is when you really start to get a feel for the combat in this game. It's fun being able to strategize when to dodge and reload your weapons, as well as how to deal with more than one monster at a time. After defeating them, you'll enter a room with a bunch of symbols. Basically, what you have to do is find those symbols and see what color they are, and point the arrow to the correlating color. By doing this, you'll open the door. But of course, monsters are in your way. Some of them easy, and others not so much. I swear, these little red bastards are the hardest to deal with in this game. But thankfully, I found a really good strategy to kill them. I know, it takes a lot of skill to do this. Once you unlock the door, you enter a room with Teddy, and he transforms into a terrifying monster starting your first boss fight. I found this really fun. I loved the utilization of the holes in the wall to dodge Teddy's attacks. It was pretty difficult and probably the hardest part of the game. But eventually, the monster tells Teddy to retreat and that he'll take care of the sheriff himself. You reluctantly go downstairs and find a huge room covered in the monster's tentacles. Slowly, you take down each tentacle and use the flamethrower to weaken this hideous thing. And once it's all cleared, you turn on the pipes, releasing fire into the monster. It works, but you have to do the same thing all over again. Yes, and I'm pretty sure if you died, you'd have to start the whole thing from the beginning. Thankfully, that didn't happen, and I managed to kill the monster and free Ashley. This is when the building starts to collapse, and you just barely make it out alive, using the ice cream truck to escape. And the story ends with Ashley now infected with the mask. Now, this chapter was by far the best and really showed me how good the combat actually is. It's a shame there isn't as much of it in the game because it flows really well and makes the gameplay interesting. But by now I'm sure you can see the problem with this game. It's so story driven that it kind of forgets to be a game first. Chapter 4 is when you actually have some form of freedom and some really fun combat, but it shouldn't have taken this long to get into some fun compelling gameplay. I think if this game was a little bigger and had you play the sheriff traveling to each location fighting off these monsters, it would have been a lot more fun instead of implementing all these different subplots. I really liked when you were able to choose which cabin to go in Chapter 6. It made the world feel connected, and maybe if they did more of this in the game, that would have helped too. But overall, it just has too many objectives from going from A to B and picking up items to progress the story. I do really hope they end up creating a sequel to this that focuses more on combat and exploration because that was genuinely fun. And of course, the gore, you just can't go wrong. The visuals have a personality, the storytelling is fun and plays on 80s horror, the music perfectly sets the tone, and the combat is genuinely a fun experience. It just needs a more compelling game loop, but only time will tell. With that said, if you enjoyed this video and need more Devilish content, take a deep dive into behind-the-scenes horrors on my Patreon, or learn how this horror game that infects your computer deserves its own subgenre. With that said, see you next time.